Hello, my friends. Welcome back once again to Vaults for Mastered. Today's episode, I'm going to deviate slightly from lore and talk about the basics. Basic training day, ladies and gents. Pathfinder. If one thing can be said about Pathfinder that scares a lot of new players is there's a lot of rules. There's a lot of things you can do. So a lot of people are stuck, me included, my players who are new to the game wondering what is it I can do on my turn again? Because I don't know if you realize this, but there are 14 basic actions you can take, select from on your turn. And then there are 10 additional specialty basic actions for a whopping total of 24 basic actions. And that's not even counting your spells and class and feats and whatever else you can do. So if you're sitting there trying to play the game and figure out what the heck you're going to do on your turn, you are not alone. So I decided as I'm trying to learn these things, I will share my insights, my experiences with these. I'm going to take these one at a time as we go through this. Otherwise, this video will be about 4 hours long. So let's get started. Let's clarify some of the simple information. I hesitate to say the basic information, but let's define what an action is. Player core 414 actions. At the start of each turn, you, a player, character, or a monster, gets 3 actions and 1 reaction to spend on that round. They can spend those 3 plus 1 on anything from that list I was just talking about, and that's not even the entire list. As I mentioned, there's spells and other stuff you can do. Now, here's something of importance that I've always struggled with. And here it is in black and white. It says there are 4 types of actions: single actions, activities, which are multiple actions, reactions, and free actions. So there it is. Let's clarify this right here, right now. Reactions, yes, are actions. So if you ever lose your actions on your turn, let's say you get stunned, you do not have a reaction. I know this is sometimes confusing because a lot of people differentiate reactions from actions, but they're the same thing according to Pathfinder rules. I know this always came up in D&D when I was playing that because you had actions, you had bonus action, you had reactions, you had your move actions. Which are actions, which are not actions? I lose my actions, but can I still move? I lose my actions, can I still reaction? It was very ambiguous. Pathfinder's done a great job as far as narrowing that down because everything is an action in the game, including the reaction. So there you go. Now, aside from that, if you're looking at the player core, you're looking at your character sheet, you're trying to figure out what you can do. One of the other things you want to know is what these little symbols mean. So if you're looking in the book, you're looking on Archives of Nethys or Pathfinder Nexus or wherever it is you're getting your information, you'll see symbols like this designating whether or not an action is a single action, 2 action activity, 3 action activity, reaction, or a free action. So those solid filled in diamond arrow shapes, those are actions you need to spend this action economy, this action currency on. A lot of things just take one of those 3 actions, single action. Sometimes you may have something like a spell or some fancy feat that takes 2 actions. It would be called an activity. And some stuff like really powerful stuff will require all 3 of your actions on your turn as you are so focused on doing that. This also represents a time commitment the way I would look at it as well. So an action would be like 2 seconds. 2 action activity, that's 4 seconds. 3 action activity, that's 6 seconds. And you get that time because a round lasts 6 seconds. Reactions are actions you can spend outside of your turn. They get triggered by somebody else's actions. A monster typically would be the trigger for a lot of player actions, but it could be something that another one of your allies does that triggers a reaction. Free actions are like what they sound like. You don't need to spend any of your action economy to use these. However, some of these are reactions as well. They have a trigger, so you can't use them unless that trigger is met. Aside from that, I don't think there's any limit to the number of free actions you could take aside from as long as the condition is met, as long as you don't violate any of the other action rules. If you happen to have more than 1 free action, I don't see why you can't use more than one on your turn. All right, so that out of the way, let's go ahead and take a look at what Pathfinder calls basic actions. One of these 14 things you can do. Basic actions represent the common tasks that you're going to do on any given turn, whether it's a PC, NPC, or a creature. Simple stuff like moving, attacking, helping others to do stuff. Everybody in the game can do these basic actions, unless there's some circumstance that it prevents it. And a lot of these actions, you'll be using them every single turn in the case of a player or in case of a monster. The first one we're going to take a look at is the aid action. It's technically a reaction, which is a little bit confusing, but let's take a look and see what it's all about. So here's the trigger. If you wish to use aid as a reaction, you need an ally who's about to take an action that requires a skill check or an attack roll. They need to be about to roll a d20 to either skill check or attack roll. Not a saving throw, not just moving or whatever else, unless you have something that specifically says that. But the aid action / reaction requires an ally that's using a skill check, attack roll. They're going to roll it. Other requirement, that ally has to be willing to accept the aid, and you need to have prepared yourself in order to take this reaction. And this is where aid becomes an action, because you need to spend an action to be ready, to be prepared to take this reaction. Let's see what this is talking about. So here's what it says. This is in the player core. You try to help your ally with a task. To use this reaction, you must first prepare to help, usually by using an action during your turn. So you're probably going to have to spend one of your 3 actions to aid another ally. You have to explain to the GM exactly how you're trying to help, and they determine whether you can aid your ally or not, so it's their call. When you use your aid reaction, you attempt a skill check or an attack roll. This is where you have to declare what it is you're trying to do, because that's going to then decide what type of skill or attack, whatever it is you're doing, so the GM has something to go on. And then the DC, the target you're typically trying to hit, is a 15. This is a change from non-remastered rules. Before the remaster, I think the target number was 20. But in the remastered rules, you just need to roll a 15 or better on this roll. And it is impacted by your bonuses, depending again upon what it is you're doing to aid your ally. Now the GM can adjust the DC up or down depending on what's going on and the difficulty of the task. The GM can add relevant traits to the prep action or to your aid reaction depending on the situation, or even allow you to aid checks other than skill checks or attack rolls. So maybe you could boost a saving throw if there was some description that you're giving that would make sense. Let's say the person needs to make a fortitude check because something's about to knock them over, and you're like bracing behind them to boost their saving throw. I could see how that would be an argument to be made that you're aiding that save. Then, aside from that, there are the range of successes like you'd see in a lot of Pathfinder die rolls. There's critical success, success, failure, and critical failure. Obviously, if you roll under the 15 or whatever the number is, you fail and you cannot help. You cannot provide aid. However, if you roll 10 or more above the target number, so let's say a 25 or higher, it's a critical success, and your ally now gets a +2 bonus circumstance to whatever it is that's triggering your aid reaction. If you're a master with whatever check it was you decided to do, so let's say you were using acrobatics or something like that, and you're a master, well then the bonus is +3. If you're legendary in that, then it's +4. If it's a success, it's just a +1 regardless of your level of proficiency. And if you critically fail, you roll a 5 or under, let's say, well then they're actually going to be harmed, hindered by your aid attempt, and they're going to take a -1 circumstance penalty. So make sure you're picking something that you're pretty good at. Now that's the rules as written version in the player core. But there are a couple of clarifying entries. One is in the GM core, and another one comes later in the player core, a couple pages after the initial aid entry. So let's see what that is. GM adjudication. So in the GM core on page 27, it does give this clarification. And some of this is already in the description of the aid reaction. It's up to the GM whether the PC's preparation is enough to let them aid. So this, at the end of the day, is a GM's call. So just because a player says, oh, I'm aiding, doesn't mean that It's automatic. So the GM is going to decide whether or not you can aid. Then there's three caveats or clarifications that are made in the GM core. It says that the preparation has to be specific to the task at hand. So, in other words, if you're saying I'm taking the aid action, I'm preparing to provide aid, I want to aid my ally on their turn, you need to be specific about what it is. You need to tell the GM how it is you're planning on aiding. You can't just get to the end of your turn and say, well, I have this extra action. I'm going to aid Johnny over there. How? Well, if somebody looks at them, I'm aiding them. No, you need to be specific. What skill you're using, what action are you planning on taking, what are you doing to aid them? You have to be specific. If you're generic, then the GM is like, well, you're not going to be able to aid them. You also can't be too ambiguous where, well, I'm going to help either Jonesy or Susie over here. It depends on who, what. And as a GM, I might say, okay, sure, but the DC is now a 20 or the DC is now a 25 because you are hemming and hawing on who you're going to help and exactly how you're going to do it. So I would bump up the DC on that one if a player is going to be ambiguous about who exactly they're helping. So that's the first thing. The second thing is the character that's attempting the aid has to be in a position or ability to actually give the aid in the first place. So if somebody's trying to climb up a wall and you're 50 feet away and you can't boost them up, well, then you can't aid them. And just shouting, you can do it, that's not aid, right? Now, maybe there's some circumstance where you could argue that, yeah, me persuading my ally to go would make sense because maybe they have a phobia of, heights. And so, you using some encouraging, type of persuasive words, maybe in that case, you might allow it. But again, that's a GM call. That has to be circumstances is appropriate. Third thing is the GM, they have to determine how long this preparation is going to take. So something might require more time than a single action. So it might take somebody's entire turn. Might take all three actions to provide aid, depending on what's going on. It might take more than one turn. It might be, hey, you need to spend one action each of the next 3 turns or 3 rounds in order to make this aid happen. These aid actions can also be used outside of encounter mode. You can use them during exploration mode as well. Let's say there's some research or something like that going on. So in that scenario, you can see where the aid action might take an hour. It might take a day. It depends on what's going on. But the GM has to make that call and has to make that decision. So as a player, it's best for you to be as specific and as clear as you can in order to get the aid action usable, this reaction possible. Don't just make it cryptically, yeah, I think I don't know exactly how. Okay, it's not just a throwaway action that you can just, I don't know what else to do, aid. Okay, how, where, what, why. Aid details. This comes from the player core 417. So this is a couple pages after the aid entry in the player core. And it gives a little bit more specificity here. A couple of these have already been covered in the GM core and in the initial description of aid, but it does clarify. So it says here that long tasks, and this goes with number 3 in the GM core here, for a task that takes longer than a round, you often need to spend more than one action preparing to help as determined by the GM. So again, it depends on what you're doing. Maybe you're trying to help somebody scale across some, tightrope, or they're going across some sort of chasm, and you are aiding people by stabilizing the rope or whatever, and it's going to take them 3 turns to cross hand over hand. Well, then you can provide aid each turn, but you're going to need to spend one of those actions each turn at least in order to aid that person to get all the way across. So it wouldn't be as simple, okay, on my turn I'm aiding Susie getting across the chasm, and I only have to spend one action if it takes her 3 turns to get across. You'll have to invest each time. The other thing, proximity. This goes with the number 2. You don't necessarily need to be next to the ally to aid them, but you have to be in a reasonable location, right, where both of you are setting up and you can prepare with each other when the reaction goes off. So if you can't see, you can't reach, you can't hear, you don't know what's going on, you can't aid somebody, then that should be a no-brainer. And then the third one is not in the original description from the player core, nor is it in the GM core, but it talks about repetition. And I could see this because this kind of reminds me of guidance in D&D, where every single thing the cleric's like guidance, 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 even though they don't even know what the player is doing. And guidance, I'm giving guidance, guidance, you guidance everybody, right? Guidance for the whole party, right? Repetition. So aiding the same creature multiple times can have diminishing returns. In particular, if you try repeatedly aid attacks or aiding skill checks against, let's say, a target creature, as a GM, you're probably going to increase a DC each time because the foe's not stupid. They're going to catch wise to that. This person keeps fainting. This person keeps throwing rocks, to distract you. So maybe it's a DC 18 the next time. It's a DC 21. It's a DC 25. The person's catching wise. They're like, no, I'm not going to fall for this again. And then the same thing if it's something, let's say, that's super like something super dumb or just ignorant, then you could probably fool. Let's say a zombie, you keep whacking it with a stick, you keep distracting it. Now, if there is no reason, the task would be less likely to work. If it is repeated, like the zombie example, then you could see how aiding that multiple times would work. Or let's say you're aiding one person to climb a wall, aiding another person to climb a wall, aiding someone to pick this lock, then helping them pick another lock. Even though it's kind of the same aid or the same, process, because it's different enough or the activity is not so intelligence, counterintelligence type of scenario, you could see where the aid would not be diminishing returns. All right, ladies and gents, I hopefully covered this aid reaction and how it works in all its glory, so that the next time you're sitting there trying to figure out, hey, what can I do with my one of my 3 actions, you can take the aid reaction as long as you prepare it correctly in time to help your ally. All right, hopefully this was some useful information and clarified it for you like it was for me when I was reading through this trying to figure it out. And if so, go ahead and like the vid, make some comments if you have any other actions you'd like to see. I'm planning to kind of going through a bunch of these and just spelling out what it means and just puzzling it out together for you, for me, for everybody. Have a good night and take care.